in. Show me the all damn day. Stay at home all damn day. Bump in. Show me the all damn day. Bump in. Show me the all damn day. Stay at home all damn day.
Well, it's that time of the week. Welcome to episode 9 of Grid Talk. It's officially Grid Talk Tuesday here once again. And joining me here tonight is both of my partners in crime. Firstly, he's very similar in stature, just like me, Alexander Searle. Welcome to the show. And the one and only Emory Lida, who was behind the scenes this weekend. We have a great show for you guys today with a lot of guests, some of our winners from the weekend and some team owners of the weekend as well. But firstly, boys, let's recap a little bit of what we had going on this weekend. Alex, you were trackside all weekend long. What'd you think about the weekend?
Yeah, a lot of great racing from start to finish, right? I mean, it's always good to when we bring the Pro Show back. We debuted it at the SCUSA Pro Tour. Now it's here for the Stars Championship Series, and I think the boys killed it. The racing was incredible on the racetrack all throughout. I mean, I'm excited for all the guests we're going to have on. We're going to get some really good insights and in-depth, information on how the weekend went for a bunch of guys and kind of some history behind some of these drivers as well. So I'm looking forward to this episode. But in terms of the weekend as a whole, the racing was great. I think the vibes were incredible all the way throughout. The energy was there, right? I mean, you get the race at Charlotte Motor Speedway. We don't get to do that very often, so I'm glad that Stars decided to go to this racetrack because to me, one of the more underrated tracks that we go to, and that was kind of the vibe that I got every time I spoke to one of the drivers about the racetrack. They said, "Listen, we should go here more often," and I agree. So I hope that this is kind of a step in the right direction for this racetrack as a whole, and hopefully next year we can go here more often.
Yeah, and Emory?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the racing really, to me, lived up to the bill and then some. We saw some really good heat races in the shifter side of things, some good battles. The OKN side saw Kaleb and Paulie Massimino coming through the field in the final, with Paulie ultimately winning. We had some really good battles in the semi-pro action as well. And in general, I mean, it was nice to be back at home, honestly. Like I mentioned last week, very close to Concord, which is my hometown. So it's kind of special to finally have a national level race there. And I mean, it was really, for me, lived up to the billing. It was a long 3 days, but I'm really glad that we were able to get a good product out of this one. And for Stars, it's a huge weekend for them. Over 280 entries, the largest event they've had so far. The introduction of the Pro Show format was a resounding success. We saw a lot of good action. They even brought some donuts on Sunday. So
Yeah.
over 400 donuts. That was a really nice gesture for them. And I think it sets the scene for a really good championship going forward.
Yeah, no, it was a great weekend through and through. I think from the Friday, walking the paddock with Alex, we knew right away, right? The energy was at an all-time high, different level. Everybody was super excited for the Pro Show, for everything that was coming their way, and I think the weekend definitely delivered. There was a lot of doubts, I must say, from the track, and people doubted. People in this stream right now, I won't say names, but the guy right next to me doubted the racing that we were going to have this weekend. And I must say, it was phenomenal racing. Well, bro. Emory doubted the racing. There was people in the live chat as well that doubted how the racing was going to be. But it was a great time. Franklin Motorsports said it the best. Stars was a lot of fun. And let's get right into it. We have a very special guest with us here today. An up-and-coming star, the best thing to come out of New Zealand since Scott Dixon, the one and only Jay Irwin. Round of applause. Your winner from the weekend. Round of applause for Jay Irwin, the kid who went from. So let's roll the clips real quick. The kid who went from a big crash in 2022 and his 14-year-old and 4-month stint. Here you have it. This is Supernats 25. And you'll see Jay Irwin, there he is, went airborne. He went from that 2 years ago to this this past weekend, crossing the checkered flag, crossing the stripe as the first Stars Championship Series Pro Show winner, the one and only Jay Irwin. A phenomenal weekend for you. I mean, what was it like being back in the States after a long flight, and you're back in New Zealand now? So what's it been? How's it been like?
Yeah, it was really good to be racing back in America. I always love to come over and race. It's by far the best place I've raced is America.
Nice. So
Yeah.
it was a great weekend for you, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people have questions for you. You were telling us you've been racing in the States for quite some time, under the radar. Obviously, some of us didn't know that you were racing Supernats 25, and then because you were so young and still getting into that shifter program, but you've developed into a great driver since then. And I know Emory and Alex have and myself have a lot of questions for you, just to get for the fans to get to know you a little better, and how you've developed throughout the sport. So Emory's gonna start us off here.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, first off, it's great to see you back on. I know I doubted you last weekend or last week on this podcast. Your dad was telling me that you guys listened and heard my prediction for AJ. And I must say, from now on, don't listen to me, listen to Alex, because I think it's established that he's A, leading the charge on the J1 fan club, and B, been pretty spot on with his predictions. So congrats on that. But I really want to talk about just your karting journey in general. I mean, Caleb alluded to it. You've been in the U.S. at points for Supernats for a while. Stepped up to shifter towards the end of 2022 and into last year in New Zealand. And we saw you at the Pro Tour, I believe, all of last year into Supernats. And then it felt like you made a marked step forward and then another step forward into this year. But I guess my question is, for being so young in shifter and kind of, let's just say it, having a complete breakthrough this season, I mean, what's led into that? And what do you think has been your overall experience so far?
Yeah, like you said, so after the end of last year, it was before Supernats, it was a pretty rough year. I crashed quite often throughout the Pro Tour, and then during the break between Supernats, the last Pro Tour and Supernats, it's starting to come into our summer, so we did a bunch of driving between that, and then I made that first kind of step forward for Supernats, and because I ended up 10th in that final, I had to start 23rd, but I came through what I thought quite good, past Pablo Polito, the world champion. So I thought that was a really good race. And then the step that I made, which I would say is a more significant one from last year to this year, was during the break. When it's your guys' winter, it's our summer. So I was down here every day driving, 30 degrees, warm tracks, you know, and I think that's propelled me forward uh, quite a lot during that time. So yeah, that's kind of the base of what it's been.
Yeah, Jay, listen, normally the natural progression, right? We talked to a lot of drivers. They go up the ranks, mini, micro, junior, senior, maybe shifter, but shifters tends to be a scary one for a lot of guys because of the physicality. A lot of drivers don't want to really handle that. Walk me through your decision to go just from junior, I'm gonna go to shifter at 14 years old in the deep end. One of your first races in the States as a shifter driver was Supernats, right? You did New Zealand stuff, but really to come into a Supernats 25, the clip that we saw of you going airborne. What was the decision like for you to for you to pretty much skip senior and go to shifter?
I'll be honest, I personally had made that decision in in micro. I you'd always watch the shifters and just be like, oh, you'd always just be amazed by like what they're doing. And so we started to introduce a shifter to my driving when I was 13. So I had a shifter and I was practicing, still racing juniors, but just practicing in a shift, starting to build that base because what we thought was important was because, like you said, it's really physical and you have a lot going on. So before you start to get into the racing of a shifter, you kind of have to be comfortable of just driving it and more in the gearbox of knowing when to be in the right gear so that when you get in racing, you don't have to think, okay, in turn 4, I go down 3 gears, and then to turn 5, I go up 2. That's just natural, and you can think about racing. But then that kind of all went out the window at Supernats when you get in the tunnel and the colorful barriers are coming past you, and yeah, it was definitely for my first shifter race straight into the fire, which is what we knew and why we chose to do that was one because you can get the dispensation to race underage, and because it gives us a good base knowledge of where we need to be at the top, and that's kind of been the first mark that we've been working off since then. So yeah.
Yeah, nextly, Jay. I mean, this year is the start of the pro show. It's a little bit different than what you've raced ever. It's kind of different for everybody else, right? So, how does I mean, you raced at SCUSA a couple of months ago. That was the first time we saw the pro show with a different qualifying, and then here at the Stars Championship Series as well. How did both of these pro shows, compare to anything that you've ever raced before? And are you a fan of it? And I guess some feedback that you have for us.
Uh, so the SCUSA Pro Show I thought was pretty good. Uh, and because it was the first one, I think if we had gone straight into that practice where it was 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off, that would have been a bit too intense for the first one. But I thought that weekend was really good. I was really happy with where we were. Uh, I will say that at Orlando, because we knew how tough of the track it was from the year before, we did go a week early and did 4 days the week before testing, and then obviously the days before the event. But I really liked the Super Pole. The Super Pole was something super interesting, and it also, showed us that some of these pro drivers are really good because Danny, he went into the wall in the Super Pole and still pulled it out of the wall and got set and qualified second, which is something that was really impressive. But the Pro Show format has, I think, benefited me a lot more than most people because of the time zone when I come and that I can, sleep in and it's closer to my time zone. And I don't have to be up until 12, which wasn't the case at Orlando because we had been there so long. So I was already on time zone, but especially at Stars, I think that helped me because at some of the Pro Tours last year, I crashed and made, like Myron said, I had growing pains, which I said was just crashing, uh, because I was a bit sleep deprivated. Like at Utah for round 4, on one of the first laps after it had just rained, I went on like the outside curb out of the really long corner, and it was wet, and I went into the dirt there, and that was just because I was tired, and I was like, okay, we can flow out to this curb, and then around I went. So that's helped me a lot with my like being more aware, I think.
Yeah, and I mean a 16 to 19-hour time zone difference basically based off of where you're racing in the US, if I'm correct on that. But looking at the weekend as a whole, you start on Friday at Stars, and we were talking about it pre weekend that it's kind of if you're in a pro category, and especially at a track that a lot of people have not run on much, like Star or like Charlotte, you go straight into Friday and suddenly you're qualifying after 30 minutes on the track or a little bit less than that. So, what do you think really helped you hit the ground running? Because you were quick basically from the get go in practice. I mean, just from this, I believe it was the second and third practice, we could pretty much see that you had really good long run pace. So, what do you think kind of contributed to that and sort of helped you out when it came to getting going right away and seemingly being on it from the get go?
Uh, so after me and Dad, we had seen the format and we knew that it was going to be really tight in between the practices. So what we did was we looked at what the track layout was, and when we were at home, we prepared for that sort of thing, and we got a kart set up that was really good for that kind of mid-speed flowy track. And then so all that we had to do during the practices was there was nothing in the kart that had to be changed. It was just me learning the track. So I think where other people they would have been learning the track and trying to adapt the kart, where we were just learning the track. So I think that was what really helped. And then like you said, like yeah, I don't know. I lost it.
You're good. Hey, take me inside like the driver's seat because in the shifter, I talked to a lot of guys who run the shifter category and they say it's so hard to stay focused for a long duration of time and those motos and those and that feature race was a very long race. But other than that, when you have three practices for 10 minutes max at a time and then you jump right into qualifying, what is it like mentally to stay focused for that and pressure wise is it an added pressure or because you've been in the fire for so long it wasn't much of an issue for you to really get into the zone quickly?
Uh, I think getting into the zone for me has been something that I've been able to do for a while, and not such getting into the zone. Like at when I won the Rotax Grand Finals in 2019, it was the night before. It looked like it was going to rain for the final, and Dad was trying to tell me about wet lines and this and that. And I said I was 11 at the time, and I said, "Don't worry, I got it." And then yeah, and then won. But like, so I think that really rapid fire stuff, I'm I'm okay with that, and I can get in and out like of the zone pretty quick. So yeah, and then like you said, the physicality, the the things that make tracks really physical is like not a long straight where you don't have time to rest in between the corners, which Charlotte did have, but the corners weren't that really physical. And because the track was new and smooth, that that also helped because like rough bumpy tracks, those are tracks that really get you tired.
I find it I find it really interesting because a lot of drivers that I spoke to have the complete opposite take of you, right? You hear Charlotte and you think it's actually a pretty physical racetrack, like it's a smooth surface, but with the long corners and with the fast chicanes, a lot of the drivers are actually complaining of rib pain or neck pain. So I guess my
And then the
question
bump on the exit of turn number 8 as well. There's a
exactly.
big old strip of
So that's
I don't know what it is, but there's a big there's a big strip. It's a big bump. A lot of drivers are complaining about that this weekend as well.
so I exactly. So I find that pretty interesting that you're saying that it wasn't physical to you. So my question is how much maybe kind of your dad being kind of very, very good in a go-kart, and then your mom, being a Red Bull athlete, do you think kind of from a young age that were they training you pretty hard to be physically in shape, and maybe that's why you're less affected by a physical racetrack?
Well, I wouldn't say training me, but because I'll be honest, I've never been to the gym. I think it's no, seriously, it's just because I've been driving since I was 5 in like a Bambino kart. I've just those laps are just there where I have the kart stamina. Like anything else, physically, I'll fall over pretty quickly. But karting is it's one of those things that I can go for a long time in, just because that's what I've been doing. And like when we practice really deliberate things where we'll go for a day and all we'll do that day is a start, 2 lap sprints, 1 lap cool down. Start, 2 lap sprints, 1 lap cool down. And that's for that because KZ racing it's really intense. It's always the first 2 laps and then the race kind of everyone strings out. And the first 2 laps are really where all that racing happens. And that's something that I was lacking at Supernats because I was starting, fourth and third for the races, but just in the first 2 laps I didn't have it, and I'd fall back to seventh and then kind of come back at the end of the race. But that was something that we do really deliberate in the practice to do that. And then the other thing, the complete opposite we'll do is we'll go into a 40-lap run, 30-lap run as a final, just to have that stamina. towards the end.
Yeah, and then nextly, Jay, on the Saturday, you and AJ were a lot closer together than on the Sunday. So I think it's safe to say you guys found something overnight going into that main event on Sunday, because once you got to, obviously you didn't have the best start, and once you got to the lead after that, you just didn't look back. So what was that progression like? Because we know during the motos, it was very hard to do any changes. It was probably tire pressure, taking those tires back or making sure the wheels wouldn't fall off. But what was Saturday like with just 10 minutes or 15 minutes of downtime and then going green again? Because you couldn't change all too much, and then you guys made that huge leap on Sunday.
I'll be honest, we didn't change the go-kart the whole week. It was the exact same setting from start to finish. I think maybe a hub change from practice 1 to practice 2. But those motos it was a really quick turnaround, and the only thing we did was I had a Gatorade. That was it. We went back to the tent, made sure the engine was right, made sure the jetting was right. I had a Gatorade, looked at the data, and then we were on the grid. And we were actually the first ones to the grid, which was quite surprising because we were what I'd normally say was late. I think OKN only had 5 minutes to go, and I thought we were rolling up late, but we're the first ones to the grid, which really surprised me. And like it was really surprising to see kind of like a lot of the field was quite tired after the first one, and then when we went to that second one, I think at the end of that race when I was faster than those that were in front of me, it was like kind of you could see that they were starting to get tired, but I thought I had plenty of time between those races. Like I thought I took too much time between them.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
that's very interesting, because hearing from some of the mechanics under y'all's tent and the likes of Diego and Henry, who unfortunately had like the engine issues. I mean, they were, wanted 15 more minutes. Some teams wanted just that extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But to hear from you that you had way too much time is is kind of crazy to hear. And then
Well, I wouldn't say way too much time.
yeah.
It was
You had enough.
I thought that the turnaround would be quicker.
Okay.
I just want to know what flavor the Gatorade was. Whatever it was the right call.
It was the blue one that kind of tastes like orange. You know that
Oh,
one?
yeah,
Glacier.
Caleb.
Is
Yeah,
it the glacier
But
one?
you know,
Oh yes, I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking
no,
about. That's what I
there's like a
stole from
blue one.
Emory. Yeah,
yeah. That was
It's
the one that you stole from me on Sunday during
during teardown.
teardown. Yeah,
oh, but it's so weird. It tastes like orange, but it's blue.
yeah,
Yeah, that one.
That was
I
some-
actually had 2 of them.
solid. No, see, I think for anyone taking notes out there, if you want the secret to success over the course of a weekend, you got to have the blue Gatorade during these pro show events. So, Jay, one other question that I had talking about your racing is also your dad's story. I mean, we've in the simplest way possible, he's a badass. Like everything that he's done from 2002 onwards in the karting experience. But you said that you got into Bambino when you were 5 years old. So that would have been, what was it, roughly 2014 or so?
2013, I think.
2000. Okay,
Yeah,
2013. So
2013,
yeah.
2014.
So how much do you think that having kind of a dad that was really, really competitive on the karting scene and sort of like an inspiration a lot with his determination. How much do you think that kind of played a role in your early years of karting and kind of him getting you out there and continuing to sort of get better and better? Because I mean, in talking with him on on Saturday and Sunday, he was extremely like I would say like interested in the racing side of things, but more than that, I want to know kind of like how do you feel like that sort of I guess being early to it, so to speak, and being racing right around the time that your dad was kind of wrapping up his karting career, at least like on the national level, like how do you think that played a role?
Uh, so I'll be honest, he started to wrap it up because I was starting, but yeah, like when I started, I was not that good. Like I was average below average, and like there was a lot of points where it was to get me to the track, you had to make sure that the TV hadn't been turned on in the morning. Like they yeah, mom and dad, if I said like the day before I want to go driving, like if I said I wanted to go driving, they'd still have to make sure that they got me out of the house before the TV was on, even though it was me that said I wanted to go driving. So that was something that I'm quite thankful that they did. Um, because I love driving. It's my favorite thing. I wouldn't do anything other than like I don't think I drive enough, even though I drive quite often. But yeah, it was like the effort that he has to put in just to do normal things is something that like when you have to see it, because I've grown up with him, like I don't know anything else than like where he is right now. So I've to a lot of people that's kind of weird, but everything that he has to do I find normal. So like when we travel, I take 3 wheelie bags, like the ones with only 2 wheels on them. I have 2 in this hand, one facing forward, one facing back, another one in this hand facing back, and that's how we have to go when you can't get a car, you know? We're like yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't say what's the word? Like inhibits, like
Yeah.
prevents, doesn't allow, but
Mhm.
that's just stuff that I've had to be getting over, like those hurdles, like the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
Like like even when we go practicing, I always push start myself because like, you know, he obviously can't. So that's something that I just find natural. And then when someone like does come to the grid, it always feels weird to get in the go kart before the race and then get pushed out. So like just things like that. And then the other good thing about always having to push start yourself is say if you crash, then you can start yourself and it's normal. It's not peculiar any way, you know?
Mhm.
And I just want to say something really quickly about the track. When we walked the track, I was like, there's not going to be any passing here. I was, but that's the most passing on a track that we've had, like that I've raced in America. It was really
Wow.
surprising.
You're not the
Like
only
when
one who
I
doubted the track. I must say, you're not the only one.
like like when I walked it the whole of Friday before I actually drove it, I was like, this would be way better in reverse. You know, if you came around like up the main straight around there, it would push
Yeah,
everyone to the outside so you could pass into the hairpin.
Mhm.
I was like, this
yeah.
track would be way better in reverse. But no, it raced really good. Like it was so surprising.
I agree,
I
and
agree.
and
Yep.
and to the viewers at home, um, Emory Lida doubted his home track last weekend. Said there wasn't going to be any passing. Said something
Hey,
around the lines the racing was going to be boring, and that first shifter moto delivered
hey,
some of the best racing action that we've seen all year long. Emory Lida, your words, please.
hey, Caleb. First off, roll back the clip from last week, and you'll find that I said I was really intrigued to see how shifter races because the long sweeping corners, I felt like it at least was a fast flowing track that personally in the US, I feel like the shifter tracks that are good or like produce good races here tend to have more long form corners. This is my opinion was based off of the like the single speed classes. Second off, this personal slander is completely irrelevant to the actual point of the segment because there is a racing driver that is way more badass, way more impressive than me
Yeah,
that is talking about all of his or what sorry, wrong one. That has done such a good thing this weekend.
correct.
And yet all you want to talk about is some comments I made on a podcast this past weekend.
Hey, hey,
Like like we're stoked to have Jay on here so that we can reduce the yapping and incorrect takes by all three of us. And
What
Christian Marsh saying that we're happy to have him in the States. Like it's a really good thing. I don't need any personal slander on my name for
all right.
takes that I might have had.
My apologies. My apologies.
no, I'll say what I thought everything you said in the last podcast was really valid. How you were like, without data, you know, it'll be really interesting to see him against Myers, and I thought that was really valid. I thought like, Alex, I thought you were making stuff up. Like, I'm gonna win the championship. I was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I was like, Emory, I was like, he's the only one here that knows what he's talking about. I was like,
Dude,
I was like,
don't
"Hey."
say that to me, bro.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my god.
Well,
No, it wasn't. I was watching it. I was lying in bed. I was like, damn, maybe he's gonna be like the harsh reality I need to hear. You know?
Hey, no, that was no. I mean, we all knew that you were gonna be close to up there after Orlando, and seeing it was the final result wasn't a fluke. You were inside the top 5 pretty much every session that weekend. Personally, I won't lie, I had my doubts about the kind of going on a quick notice, especially with the format the Stars have, where you weren't on track until Friday. Um, without someone like Mateus. But as it turns out, you and Ian both had pace pretty much from the drop. And you mentioned kind of pre-pod the difference in driving styles. And I guess kind of going off of what we were talking about about last week, the one kind of final question I have on your side of things is it was again like we mentioned a different format. You had kind of to be on it from the get-go. Um, how did that impact you when it came to like from the end of the days when it came to trying to sort of figure things out in the debrief, looking over the data? Of course, you and Ian both were up at the front, so I think that you had a lot of good data to compare and not stylistically compare. But sort of what things did you learn from day to day, and how did that compare to some of the other formats or some of the long form weekends that we've seen in the past?
Uh, it was a lot more where, like I said earlier, where we did our like homework on the kart beforehand, and it was just driving. So, like, it was most times we race, what we start is what we like finish on, like from first practice to the final. But you go through a lot of things in between. Like at Orlando, we went through a lot of different settings and gearings, like from testing to the final, but we started and ended on the same thing. Where I think this just eliminated that middle bit, and if your setting wasn't quite right, you couldn't go through everything to try and find that thing that was, you know? And so I think that was one of like the bigger differences in what helped me be, you know, as fast as I was compared to everybody else. So that was yeah.
Jay, we have a lot of nationalities that we see on the grid, but you're one of the few that we get to see from New Zealand. So tell us kind of the differences in maybe driving style in format that you see over in New Zealand versus here, and kind of what keeps bringing you back to the States.
Uh so the thing that I really like American racing because of the way that it's officiated. If that makes sense. Like you can you like this is gonna sound really weird to you guys, like you're allowed to make contact with other go-karts. Where in New Zealand, the racing that we have and the way that it's officiated, all contact is penalized, you know? And say if someone is slower and they're just blocking, you can't give them a little tap and you know keep like a little bump and run. We hear that's seen by the officials as okay. Where at home there's not really that thing. So when I race at home, we focus really heavily on qualifying and trying to qualify at the front to then so then you don't have to make passes like so then you don't get bottled up. Where I don't want to say we don't focus on qualifying because we do, but there is always that reassurance that you can push your way forward, you know? And I think that's one of the biggest things. And I, it's just racing in America is just so much fun, you know? And because every time we come to America, because we're with the team and we just learn so much every time we're here. Because in New Zealand, me and my sister, we're the only people that drive barrels. So like my sister's a mini and we're the only people in New Zealand that drive barrels. So there's like quite a big knowledge gap, and that's why we come to America, is to fill that. Like, because every time we go to America, we always learn so much, and that's. But then the other thing that we get to is we get to learn it in America, and we may not get to race it that week, but then we get to come home and test it, see what works, see if it does work or if it doesn't. But then something that's really good about New Zealand is where I live, we have 3 tracks and a 30-minute drive, and they're all like really good tracks. Like could hold FIA races, like super good tracks. And so like we get to just come home and drive. And in New Zealand, like practicing is really cheap compared to America. So say if we did move to America, when we go testing in somewhere like Orlando and you have to pay the $100 driver fee and then mechanics, even though that's double for us in our currency. So that to us seems like a lot, because to get on the track where we are is $20 New Zealand, which is
Wow.
10 US dollars. Just
Hmm.
all day unlimited practice, and most of the time you'll be the only one there. So that's what keeps us here in New Zealand, is because it's just close enough to where we can commute to race in America, but then we get to come home and do all this practice that's, good quality practice, you know?
Yeah. Jay, we got a really good question from the live chat from BSR Flex Racing. What is the main chassis in New Zealand? Like in America, it's the OTK.
And we have some really, because we're really like excluded from the rest of the world, there are some chassis that aren't so popular. So in direct drive, it's OTK and Praga. In shifter, the main chassis is a Drago. So
Okay.
50% of the shifter field is Dragos, and then there's me and a barrel, and then there's some OTKs and a few Kart Republics. There's virtually no Kart Republic here. There's like a few, lot of Praga, a lot of OTK, and like other brands associated with those two companies.
Yeah. So Jay, as our time with you comes to a close, I have my last 2 questions for you. You got a big trophy this weekend at the Queen City Gambit. How did you have to get another carry on? How did you manage getting that back to New Zealand here this weekend?
So I got it into my bag. My bag was just long enough,
Wow,
but it did break on the way home.
dude.
It's very flexible. So the bolt that goes through the top of it, from obviously the bag being moved around, had just like broken, and then because it was 3 pieces, the base, that little middle bit, and the top bit, so it had come apart. We have all the pieces, and we just need to bolt it back together. But
Goodness
it
gracious.
was we did get back to the hotel, and I was staring at it like, where's this gonna go?
Well, I'm pretty sure Christian Marsh is watching now and probably very upset that you broke their very nice trophy for their inaugural
It
pro
wasn't me.
show.
It was not me. It was the airport.
Well, that's someone to blame. But lastly, Jay, you should be in school right now. You missed school to be on Grid Talk right now, and I know some of your friends back there are watching. So this is your time, to promote yourself, what's coming up for you, and then if you want to give a quick shout out to, anybody that helped you out this past weekend.
Yeah. So next thing for us is 4th round of the New Zealand Championship, and then a week after that we're back for round 2 of Stars in Newcastle, and then it's Cincinnati for SCUSA. So that's what the next little bit's looking like. I just want to say a huge thank you to PSL, because they've put so much time and effort and believing in me for me to end up being, for a championship like Stars, their top driver. I'm so grateful and thankful for them. And they've done a lot of work since last year to this year, like I have in that off season, developing the material and the engines, and we're we're definitely in a better place than we were last year as a whole team. I just want to say thank you so much to them and to Dad, my whole family, for giving me the time to do what I love.
Well, Jay, it's been a pleasure having you. From myself, Emory, and Alex, it's been great getting to chat with you, and we're so thankful that that you took time out of your day and you missed school to join us here for episode 9 of Grid Talk. So. From all of us, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll take this time to head over to a quick commercial break.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you finally want to get behind the wheel, huh?
Yeah, I've been shooting for 3 years and I've never got to drive.
Well, you're gonna need some more gear than just your helmet. Why don't you go to shopakr.com? They got their inventory online and they'll ship it the same day if you order before 5:30 p.m. Eastern.
They got shoes,
Yep,
gloves,
yep,
rip protectors.
got those too.
Can they make me go fast?
No.
Here at Acceleration Kart Racing, we've got everything you need to get on track. What happens next? Well, that's on you. Check us out online at shopakr.com.
Well, welcome back, and we get set. We heard there from Jay Irwin, your race winner from last week at the Pro Show. So that we heard from a driver there. Now it's time to switch over to more of the industrial side of things, and we'll hear from one of our team owners here, a guy who's was one of the faces of KC Happy Hour when it was there. He makes his KC on air podcast return, the one and only Brandon Jarsekrak. Round of applause for the legend, if his camera will upload. Here we have it. Brandon, pleasure having you. A home race for you guys, and I think you're on vacation, right, as well. So how's it going? It's been 2 days since we've seen you. 2-3 days, yeah.
Yeah, it's been good. Rounded out the week at Charlotte. 30 minutes from our home base in Mooresville. Went back there on Monday, unloaded the trailer so that the guys at the shop could get work done while I go on vacation. And then this morning caught a flight down to Grand Cayman, and I'm here on vacation for this next week with my family. So looking forward to that, some relaxation after our insane season we've already had. So looking forward to that, and then get back at it next week at a club race at Trackhouse.
Yeah, and Brandon, I mean, first off, a national race weekend that's only 30 minutes from home, logistically is, I would imagine, a good bit easier than about 8 to 9 hours. And so to be able to go from sort of the winter where it seems like you're always going back and forth to Florida to Charlotte this weekend, I mean, how was it kind of sort of having that, not necessarily a home race because it's not a track you get to test at a ton, but certainly one that's a lot closer to home?
Yeah, it was definitely really nice. I mean, logistics for this one were actually harder than you would think normally because of the NHRA being in town. So hotels were a little bit more booked up. Everything was kind of like really busy. So it was actually harder for me to get hotels this time than like a normal race, but we worked it all out. That was fine. I actually wound up staying down in Charlotte instead of going back up to Mooresville just because of the traffic on 77. You could get caught there and then be late for the track, especially with the early start times we had this week. But yeah, the traveling, it was a short week for us because we had a club race the weekend before at Trackhouse. So got everything ready at the shop on Monday and Tuesday, and then shot down to Charlotte on Wednesday. Got everything set up in the garages, which was really nice because I didn't have to set up any tents on Wednesday or Thursday, and then didn't have to tear any down on Sunday, which is very nice to do for a change. And other than that, it was a good weekend.
Brandon, you have the unique perspective to give us of, being a driver and a team owner. You've seen the Pro Tour Pro Show. Now you've seen the Stars Pro Show being successful here with Pauly. From a team owner's perspective, what does the Pro Show provide for you? It is easier for you as a team owner, the same, or has it hindered anything because of the, quick turnarounds that you guys have in the practices?
No, I think it was nice to have the Pro Show because I actually utilized Pauly for coaching on all the star stuff. He actually wasn't scheduled to race at all. He was scheduled to just work the whole time. And then on Friday morning, we got asked if he would run in OKN, and I said, sure, why not? So we built a card up Friday during the day, which kind of saved us a lot. because otherwise we were not going to be ready to go for practice on Friday. But yeah, it was nice having that whole morning for him to work and coach the other kids under the tent. And even in between the sessions of his practice, he would have to go back to the tent and finish the coaching he was doing earlier in the day. So he didn't really get time to like debrief much with us. We kind of just watched what we saw on track, looked at the micron, and then kind of made the changes that we needed to make. And honestly, we didn't really do much of anything except one gear change, which actually we went the wrong way. So I went back to what we started on and ran that the whole weekend. And other than that, it was just basically check the reads on the motor and replace them every single time, unfortunately. And yeah, it was definitely a very quick turnaround time. And luckily that we only had one cart in the pro show. So it was kind of like an all hands on deck when we got back to the garage. We had one guy that was specifically there to check the reads, one guy to do the tires, one guy to change gear if we had to and lube the chain, and one guy just kind of do like a quick nut and bolt check and add fuel and stuff like that. So that was cool because it kind of brought the aspect that we had when we do the shootout races at the Miami Grands, which I think are like some of the coolest events that we have. It kind of brought that aspect into it because it was kind of like a whole team effort to get his cart ready to go back out so quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about Paulie on the driver coaching side of things, I mean, this is what, year 4, year 5 overall of VGR in some way, shape, or form? Because I know you started sort of some club level coaching to some degree, running with like Sam Corey back in 2020 or so, correct?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably around year 4 or 5. It started out very, very small, like you said, with like 1 or 2 drivers, and all stopped racing, and then partnering up with Mike Doty, it kind of just all exploded very quickly, and now we're what we are now. So
yeah. So in that time, I mean, you've had Paulie as a driver coach for a good amount of time with that, even with him racing for other teams than MJR, BDR, or wow, MDR, BJR. That was a dyslexic moment. but you've had him kind of coaching for a good while at the club races, but then when you go to the national races and he's racing on, say, USPKS and or prior to this year on the Pro Tour, how much of an added benefit is that to have him kind of back in the fold full time, fully focusing on coaching during the day when you have some of the guys that you work with a lot, or that he's worked with a lot in developing them? Like I think of like a Mason Walters, for example, in KA, that he's kind of been working with them for years. How do you think that helps when it comes to having him back full time on a race weekend?
Yeah, I think that helped a lot because like this weekend we had, with Paulie included, we had 27 drivers under the tent.
That's insane.
And so we had 2 driver coaches. We had Paulie doing, and we kind of split it down the middle. We had Paulie doing some, and then Austin Miles, my other driver coach, that does basically coaching for us at everything except the club races. Especially when Paulie's like in season at USPKS and Pro Tour, he does all the coaching. But yeah, it helped a lot because a lot of our local kids that run at the club races with us stepped up to do stars this year. So Paulie has a lot of experience coaching a lot of them, not just on the club races, but all the coaching he does during the week, doing the lead follow sessions and stuff like that. So that kind of helped make their transition easier because he already had experience with them and could kind of know how to talk to them easier. And not just that, but I think it really helped that Paulie was doing the coaching, and then he went out and kind of backed up what he was telling all the kids and kind of showing them like, hey, I do know, like we do know what we're saying, and this is kind of how you do it. Because even when we would come back, he would show the kids his video, like see how, like something that was really important this weekend was rolling onto the throttle really late, and Paulie was doing a really good job of it. And he'd come back, show his video to all the kids, and be like, this is how you do it. So it was nice to have that, to him set an example for the rest of the kids as well.
Yeah, and I mean, Nextly, right? It was y'all's first weekend, I think, on the OKN package, if I'm not mistaken. The first time Paulie probably had Paulie driven the OKN before this weekend.
So last year when
correct,
the OKN first came out, we did a few sessions with him doing testing for the carburetor because we were helping SRP at the time get the carburation tuned in and stuff like that, just to get a baseline. So I actually drove for a little bit, and then he would hop in and drive when I would get tired. So he drove it a few sessions, but nothing like more than, I would say, 3 or 4 sessions at most. So it was just we jumped in and hoped for the best. Didn't really know how it was going to go, but I could tell from the first session out we were going to be good because we went out on our race tires from Texas, which were definitely not good anymore, and we were within 2 or 3 tenths of people with new tires, and we stayed that consistent every time. And then when we put new tires on, then we qualified, I believe, third by not very much, and then we found a little bit more in the heat. We dialed the cart in a little bit more, and then that's when the when we started doing really well and found a lot of pace. But yeah, we had all the experience last year with
Yeah, correct.
with Henry Wheeler. Yeah, and we should have won the championship last year, but a little mistake at MCC cost us that. But we had, I think, 3 podiums and 1 win, so we had a pretty good season of that last year. But I think this year everyone's kind of stepped their game up more, so I think it's going to be a much more difficult season than last year was.
Yeah,
So you guys
correct.
are
And
Yeah.
go ahead,
you-
Emory. Go ahead, Emory.
I was gonna say, so are you guys planning to run the full season now, having seen Paulie's success in round 1?
As of now, it kind of depends. I know Christian Marsh, the head of Stars, was kind of talking about maybe doing a little bit of a format change and with the pro show, as long as it doesn't hinder into me using Paulie as a driver coach, then we'll be able to do that. That's kind of what our plan is now. But if they move it kind of to the middle of the day a little bit, then I'm gonna have to use Paulie as a driver coach, because that's what we agreed on for this year, because we have too many people for Stars. I can't only have one driver coach. So
This is obviously a track that we haven't seen in recent memory, and the two-stroke side of things back with WKA a couple of years ago was the last time we really saw a two-stroke race held here. I mean, what's it like bringing 27 guys here, majority of them having not seen this racetrack before, and having to get up the pace pretty quickly?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very difficult track. It's when you look at it, the layout doesn't look very difficult, but the surface makes it weird. It was kind of like a Road America type surface where there's not a lot of grip. But it's like a very weird thing because it has grip, but it doesn't have grip at the same time. And if you overdrive it all, then you might kill yourself. But I think it made it a little bit easier for us. I think it made it a little bit easier for us because both me and Paulie and a couple of the kids under the tent, we all did the CKNA race at Charlotte for the past. I've done it the past 3 years. I think Paulie's done it the past 2 years, I believe is what we've done. So that kind of helped a little bit, just kind of knowing the surface. But quite honestly, running the Vega tire on Charlotte was a complete 180 from running the MG tire on Charlotte. So I don't really know if much translated. The only thing that kind of helped a lot was the gearing, because I kind of related the gearing from what we ran in 206 at Charlotte versus what we run it at Trackhouse, and then just kind of put those gears on. And I think we got it pretty close right away.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I remember from Paulie's interview at the end of the day on Sunday, he mentioned how this was a track that he'd always struggled at. And personally, I was there when we ran the very. So, I guess when you mentioned earlier about how important it was to roll speed late through the corner and kind of get adjusted to that, and you have 27 drivers under the tent, like you mentioned. What are some of the things that go in as a team owner and also on your coach's side of things to make sure that kind of everyone's on the same page as a driver? And then how do you think they all responded this weekend? Because it looked like, at least in the semi-pro stuff as well, that you had a lot of success, a lot of guys up front, especially in the KA side of things.
Yeah, definitely our KA senior guys, they adapted very well. It really helped that we had James Overbeck, who is kind of like our head KA driver this year. He's been competitive at every race we've gone to so far. And he's very good at kind of being patient and waiting on the gas, and he was driving the track very proper. And we had his data to compare to, so that kind of got a lot of the seniors up to speed a lot quicker. And then we even used his data to compare with the juniors, and our juniors, they were struggling at the beginning, but all of them just kept progressively getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And quite honestly, for a lot of them, it was their first national race in KA, and some of them even their second or third time racing a KA competitively. So that was good to see. I think most of them made the race. I think we had 3 or 4 unfortunately not make the race in K Junior. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, we had a lot of people competitive. Also, then in mini Swift, we had Marco Samet. He was in the top 5 pretty much all weekend. I think just a racing incident at the end of the final kind of moved him back to 6th, so that was unfortunate. But then also micro, we had Lawrence Pierman and Parker Stewart. They were top 5 all weekend, and then in the final, Lawrence just kind of lacked a little bit of pace, both of them a little bit, and I think they finished just outside the top 5. But overall, it was a very good weekend for the whole team as a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, moving back to the OKN side of things, right? You guys had some sort of issue on that Moto 2. You know, after you guys just went out there and swept the first moto, and then going out to that second moto. You know, how was that, right? Because that seemed to be the case this weekend. There was a lot of mechanical issues with very little downtime in between both of the motos. What was that like? And then what was the issue that you guys ended up having with Paulie's cart?
Yeah, so that was always on my mind all weekend because I knew going into it the reeds were going to be an issue because we struggled all last year kind of keeping reeds in the motor, and if someone can figure out a way to fix it, it would be amazing because it would make everyone's life a lot easier. But yeah, actually in Moto 1 at the end of the moto we popped a reed just a little bit, not very much to hinder performance a lot. So I put new reeds in it for Moto 2, and the reeds were fine, and we come back to the pits. I started on the stand before the moto. Everything was no problems at all. Ran fine. Pushed it off. It backfired just a very little bit, but Paulie said as soon as he hit the gas, he knew there was a problem. And I, after the Moto 2, I took the carburetor off, put it on the pop-off gauge, and it wouldn't hold any pressure. So the needle got stuck wide open, and it just was pouring fuel everywhere. So that was our problem. We rebuilt the carburetor Saturday night, and all Sunday we had no problems with it.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, how tough is it compared to a normal weekend? You've done the Miami Grand style format, you've done the Pro Show and Pro Tour, you've done the Pro Show now in the Stars Championship Series. Those quick turnaround times. I mean, is that like is that the main thing that could cause these maybe lapses in mistakes happening maybe in the pits where it's just you're so focused on one thing where maybe you miss something else, a small detail because of the quick turnaround time?
For sure. I definitely think that's a little bit of an issue. Like you saw a couple people, I think, got DQ'd for having the wrong tires on or something like that in Moto 1 or Moto 2 or something like that, just because they honestly, if I didn't have a guy that I said specifically your job is just to do the tires and make sure the right ones are on, we probably would have missed it too. But that was kind of the nice thing of having, like I said, we had 4 or 5 people helping out and just making sure everything got done properly. That can be good and that can be bad. This time it worked out pretty good. Unfortunately for us, even with what happened to the carburetor, I don't think we would have caught it no matter what, because that's not something I had like on our list to check, is to make sure the needle wasn't stuck wide open, and I don't think we would have caught it either way. But I definitely see the short turnaround times kind of being troublesome if we keep on this this format, because say you get in a crash in Moto 1 and you got to replace the whole front end of the cart, you're going to be very struggling for time, or very close on time to get back to the grid in time. So I think we got to put a little bit more time in there, but you also want to make sure you don't put too much time in there that it's just all long and drawn out, because I think having the short time where the whole team's got to get involved is kind of a cool aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree. And on that topic, I mean, what would you then recommend, having been a driver for so long? Now you're an owner. You have a lot of drivers in the semi-pro class. You have Paulie. You had Wheeler last year, but that wasn't with the Pro Show. So now with the pro guys, I mean, what would you recommend format wise where you would say this would benefit the racing, benefit the driving for these guys, and still maybe not add an hour to the schedule at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a hard decision. You have to sit down and do a lot of calculations with the time and stuff. But honestly, I think we don't need like another 30, 45 minutes in between sessions. We just need like a 10 or 15 minute window, or even do something where just walking back to the pits is almost taking up too much time. We need to figure out if maybe we can do like a hot pit situation where everyone kind of has their own pit stalls and you don't really have to run back and forth. because that's just drawing out the time, and then you can actually like see, okay, this is how much time I have to go. I can still do this, this, and this, and you're all just right there already. So then it also kind of, I think, make the show a little bit better because you guys could have a grid camera where you walk up and down and see what everyone's doing and get a little bit more involved that way, like we do at Miami Grants.
Grant.
Now, when we get the larger classes, then it's going to be harder because we're going to run out of space. But I think with where we're at now, we can kind of go down that road and it'll be okay. I did talk to Christian a little bit. I think what we need to, for the stars side of things, I think we do need to move the pre-finals for the semi-pro class to Sunday, just because people are spending a lot of money to come to these races, and the people that unfortunately don't make the A final, they're only doing 2 days of racing. They're racing on Friday, or practicing Friday, qualifying Friday, and then only racing Saturday, and they have nothing on Sunday. So I told Christian, I think maybe we need to move the pre-finals to Sunday morning. Unfortunately, it'll draw our day out a little bit longer, and we won't get out of there as quickly. But it'll make the customers happier, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point that you had it. Also, I mean, that Saturday, I mean, it was a bit long. I think we were live for roughly about 12 hours, and we got all like the pre-race done. It was, I think, 2 heat races, then the pre-finals. So I get your point of I guess moving maybe pre-finals over to that Sunday or whatever it may be. But speaking of the Miami Grands as well, like you were saying with the hot pit stuff, that was, I think, in the idea for the Friday practice sessions, talking about the practice sessions, right? They were only roughly about 7 minutes long. Was that, do you think, enough time to practice and to learn the track, or do you think, having very little practice and having to be on it right from the go brought the field closer together?
Yeah, I think I personally like the less practice is better. Like, I like the way Stars does it, even going away from the pro show, how they only do the 4 practices even for semi-pro. I think we do way too much practice in our sport right now, unfortunately, because like you go to some of the other series, we do three days of practice and 2 days of racing. You see more practice and you see racing, and I think racing is what we're all here for. Why don't we should do more racing. But going to the pro show, I think, since we're calling it the pro show, I think less practice is good. I think 3 rounds was perfect. Short little sessions where we had enough time in between to make little changes, not having to make very big changes, because being in the pro show, I think you should have your, like Jay was saying earlier, they kind of came with a setup and they didn't really have to deviate from it. I think that's a good thing. You kind of have to prepare a little bit at home and think it through and try and bring your best thing for your first session, because you got to be right on your game. But yeah, I think maybe if we do maybe like a 10 or a 12-minute session and be able to do like a hot pit where you can change something, that might make it a little bit more interesting and easier. But I did like how we ran really long races. I think that was a very good thing, because you saw so much develop throughout the race, where you saw people that were really quick at the beginning and then they fell off, and people that were kind of slow at the beginning but came on at the end. And I think it made the development of the race a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and Brandon, I mean, at this point, it's been almost it's been about 2.5 years since you kind of stepped away from the seat full time. And one of the last races that I think you did on the national level was the very first Miami Grands. And I'm curious to see kind of what are your thoughts on how the sport has progressed from a format standpoint as well as from an event standpoint since then, and kind of what are the things that you both like and dislike about sort of where we've gone in that time frame?
Yeah, like I said, I the part I really dislike is the amount of practice that we do. One, because it makes the weeks really long for the teams and stuff like that. Because some races we go to, we got to be there on Monday, if not Tuesday, to set up for the race, and that's just like we're there for 7 days or something like that, and it makes logistics very hard and stuff like that, going to the next races. But yeah, I liked, like you said, I participated. One of my last races was the first Miami Grands, I believe, back in 2021, I believe it was, and that was one of my favorite races that I participated in. Especially the shootout races. I thought that was really cool, because it brought the whole team into it and stuff like that, doing the the 10 or 12 minutes we had in between sessions to fix or change or whatever we need to do. And now from a team owner standpoint, I thought it was really cool last year. I think last year was the first team owner at it. And it was just cool seeing everyone try and bring their best setup, their best guys to do all the work on the carts. And it was, I just think it's a cool, entertaining aspect, especially the way you guys covered and stuff like that, with walking through the grid, seeing all the work that everyone's doing. And it's just everyone's rushing around and making it very quick. So I think it brings a pressure aspect to it. And I don't know what you would call it, but it just brings a cool aspect to it.
Got you. And I mean, again, I think the kind of reduction of practices is something that we've sort of talked about on year in the past, and something that I think that we're all kind of in agreement that there's a firm middle ground between coming in prepared or having the chance to sort of dial things in a weekend, and some of the overkill that we see when it comes to 2 full days of practice, and then sometimes even the track operated Wednesday practice as well. One last question from me, kind of more of a personal one, because next weekend I'm back at it at Trackhouse. It's been a few months since I've run a club race, and I think out there you've got about the biggest team possible. So I was wondering if you had any tuning advice for Kay as we get set on a new tire compound for me, and knowing that you guys have been up towards the front this year.
Keep it standard, like always.
Solid. Appreciate
That's
that.
honestly all. That's our speed secrets. Is keep it standard.
Got you. Oh man.
Yeah, well, as we wrap up this segment with one and only BJR, MDR, and I think now it's PMR, right? Paulie Massimino Racing, something like that. I believe he's joined forces with you guys or something like that. What
started his own thing for his coaching around GoPro and
he's got, I swear, like the best possible gig when it comes to coaching. Like I swear, I go out there and I see he's got his individual coaching. He works with you on race weekends. He drives his cart. I mean, it's definitely a lot of work, and Paulie puts in the work. But I gotta say, like, in terms of the aura of what he does at GoPro is or Trackhouse, it's pretty sensational.
This kid.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. He has, I mean, I know all the customers he has, and there's some days it's 3 customers a day for 4 hours each. So he puts in long hours and does a lot of hard work, and he makes a lot of the customers happy with doing the lead follow sessions. That's one of his big things, and I think it helps the kids a lot. And but yeah, he definitely lives the life with driving a go-kart almost every single day, and then being able to do the coaching and then racing for me as well. So he puts in a lot of hard work, but he also he gets rewarded too.
Yeah, well, and I saw a flashback video from a few years ago where he had Paul out there. The two of them were going. He had Paul in one of his old carts, so I might need to add in another one of those lead follow sessions. But no.
Yeah. I remember that day. It was pretty funny. I think Paul definitely needs a lot more coaching than anything. So he definitely needs lead follow. Maybe a ratchet strap to the back of the Paulie's cart.
Oh man.
Yeah, well, Brandon, we thank you very much for taking this time out of your vacation, much needed vacation, I must say. But we know you guys are very big around the Trackhouse club scene, so I'll give you this time to promote yourself. What's next for the team, and when you'll be back in the seat, because you've been running a lot of CKNA Grands this year.
Yeah, so next for us for the team is a Trackhouse club race, not this weekend, but the following weekend. Getting ready for USBKS the following weekend of the club race at Trackhouse. And then I think we have a weekend off, or I believe Daytona CKNA South might be that weekend, which I'm not 100% sure yet if I'm going to attend or not. And then I think we go to Stars Newcastle. I don't know. The schedule just all runs a blur right now because it's just weekend after weekend after weekend. But yeah, then the next time I'll be in the seat will be for CKNA at Pittsburgh. I think that one's called Summer Nats or something like that. I think it's in June or July. I don't remember which one, but that's the next time I'll be racing. And then the only other race I really plan on doing right now is CKNA Grands at the end of the year. So.
All right. Well, we thank you very much again for joining us here to have of what it was like from the team owner seat rather than the driver's seat. So Brandon, thank you very much, and we'll take this time to go to a quick commercial break so we can get into our next segment.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, guys.
Brandon.
Yep, thank you.
Colin, I need a new 219 chain. I need a 77 tooth roof sprocket. I need some more chain lube, and I need it probably as soon as like tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, are you even listening? Like, we need this to run this weekend.
Want anything else?
What do you mean?
I already got it in the car on Acceleration Kart Racing's online store, bro. All orders over $200 get free shipping.
Oh, throw in a set of tires.
Done.
Everything you need, all in one place and shipped to your door for free on orders of $200 or more. Exclusions apply. Shop AKR.com.
Well, after that little commercial mishap that we just had there, we are back and ready to take you guys through the rest of the show with a couple of cool segments that are coming now. But we will talk a little bit about the racecraft from the weekend, which, in all honesty, wasn't all too bad. And just an incident that happened in the OKN Stars class. So before we get into the clips that we have ready for the show, Emory, you were behind the scenes all weekend long. What did you think about the racecraft from the weekend and how it played out?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a whole, the first weekend for Stars went about as good as it possibly could have gone from a racecraft standpoint. I mean, you're always going to have some incidents through the field and whatnot, but if you look up at the front in the top 10, I felt like the KA finals, you had very reasonable racecraft. There is some discussion to be had about the white lining, which I think is unfortunately something that we've seen a lot more of as of late. And Brandon Lemke mentioned it in his interview that he basically realized that he should have blocked earlier. And I think there's an argument about kind of is white lining is blocking good for the sport and whatnot. And you could go back and forth on it. It's clean. It's not necessarily like dirty driving by any means, but it is maybe a little bit frustrating to watch on the side. I think we saw a lot of that in the KA sides simply because of how wide Charlotte is and how hard it is to pass in some of the corners where you get affected by dirty air and the lack of kind of switchback options. But as far as the actual racecraft goes and the actual like cleanliness of it, I felt like this was about as clean of a national race as we've seen in recent memory. I mean, trying to think, there weren't too many major incidents that came about. We have the one incident between Nicholas Terlecki and Paulie Massimino we're going to talk about in a few minutes on the OKN side of things that kind of sparked up a lot of debate. And then there were a couple of minor incidences over the course of the weekend throughout the field and the pro side that were questionable. I know Josh Conker, Vincenzo Saracino had a little bit of a go to getting together and some other stuff in the midfield. But as a whole, the racing was really clean. Like we mentioned earlier in the pod, I felt like I was maybe a little bit too harsh on the track coming into the weekend. It put on.
Sorry,
look, bro. You know, after last week, I felt bad about the amount of short jokes I made about you guys.
All right.
I don't feel so bad about that, you know.
All right.
And hey, just remember, I was listening through a headset to every single thing you said this weekend.
True.
And I could bring up a number of different mishaps that we had. But
hey, true.
You know what? We're not going to do that though, because that would take way too much time.
Yes, sir.
I don't have that type of time. So, it was a good weekend for racecraft. It was a good weekend for Kaleb and the comms, and I can't complain. I think Stars put on a good show.
Yeah, I can completely agree. Yeah, I mean, so obviously the incident OKM, but everything else was pretty good, right? I think there was only one red flag this weekend, which was in the KA race. But it was the big talking point in that KA class was just the white lining, right? I think it all really unfolded whenever rookie Mason Walters was in the lead for that start of that race, and you saw him white line. Yeah, in that first heat, and you saw him white line a lot, and I wouldn't say it was intentional to do that, but I think it's just
it was 100% intentional.
Well, okay, well I will say it was intentional, but I think it's just that junior mentality of racing for a rookie like Mason Walters.
No, I kind of wish we still had Brandon on, honestly, because I think it's a genuine strategy that like I've seen Mason race. I've seen the guys that you see that are kind of the serial offenders of this, right? And Mason, I think, right or wrong, it's a genuine. It's not dirty, not in the slightest. Like it's a legitimate racing strategy.
Mhm.
But Mason's always been someone that has been very assertive on the white lining. If he's up at the front of the field and he feels like he's under any sort of pressure, he'll do it. It stacks up the field. At a track like Charlotte, I think it works really well because you don't have that many easy passing zones. There's only one on the track where I would say you lose less than a tenth of a second making a pass. So for him to do that and kind of invite passing through the rest of the pack, I think was a legitimate strategy. And I don't mean to single Mason out here, by the way. I honestly think there was a little bit of it that was maybe overkill on his end that sort of shuffled him back in that heat race. But fundamentally, given the rules and given the way that KA seems to be raced over the last couple of years, it was the right concept, just maybe a little bit overeagerness as a senior rookie. And I think Adam Brickley in the final did a very similar thing as well with how he kind of stacked up the field early in the race. And you look at it and it almost worked out for him. He was able to get the field a pack of about 8 or 9 go-karts that were equal down to 4, sort of shuffled out a couple of the guys that would have been contending for the podium. And then down the stretch, I mean, he made it essentially a 2 to 3 kart race in the final few laps. And he came up short. He lost a one-on-one battle to Isambard. But I think Brickley showed in the final it's a legitimate strategy and it's fully intentional. Like having been in the seat, having ran sometimes towards the front at these level races. I can tell you NKA, you 100% go into the race knowing that if you have 6 carts on your back bumper, you're going to white line it. And do I think that that's the cleanest of strategy, or do I think that that's like the most pure strategy? Not really, but until we change the pushback bumper system, until we see some adjustments to kind of the driving code, so to speak, I think that it's going to remain the same where the optimal strategy is to white line until you get a bit of a field break.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and to clarify, like the issue, it's white lining. Not, I don't want to say issue because, like you said, like in certain cases, it's a strategy. The problem occurs when it happens so early in the race. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with it with 2 to go, 3 to go. It's kind of understood that that's just going to happen. You see the 2 to go sticks, and bottom of the racetrack, the leader goes. But when you're 2, 3 laps into a race, and the leader just goes straight to the bottom of the racetrack, it can become frustrating. That's why you heard it from Lemke's interview, right? It wasn't almost frustration, more like deflation of should have done it earlier. I think he wanted to race a race of, work together and pull away rather than a race of let's stack the field up and I have to now defend for third instead of battle for the lead, which is what tends to happen. But that's exactly why it becomes a strategy, is because the leader knows that if he can do it for enough laps, there's going to be a battle for third, and then the field stacks, and then the field spreads out. And so if you can succeed at it for multiple laps, it's okay. And like you mentioned, with the pushback bumper system, that it varies between series until that gets kind of solved. The issue of white lining won't get resolved either because drivers are too concerned with as much as they would probably love to move somebody out the way. Most of the time you can't. And so I think that's something that it's also a bit of track based, right? At a track like Charlotte with not many switchback opportunities, you have the double lefts. But if you could park it on the apex, you could pretty much defend the entire racetrack, right? Like at a Homestead, if you white line turn 1, you're going to get crossed up every single time. You see it at GoPro sometimes as well. It's pretty difficult to succeed at white lining for a while. We saw Dalton Haynes pull it off. When was that at Emory? Was that one of the club races when he did that?
No, it was Stars 2022.
Stars.
It was
Yeah.
in one of the heat races, and he stacked up a field of 15 Ks for
And it
5
works.
laps.
And it works.
And it's
You saw
happened before.
Keeble do it as well at MCC last year. So
Yeah.
And again, I mentioned this in the chat, right? Or in like our Discord for talking through these episodes, but this is one of the things that I've had to learn when it came to kind of racing the younger drivers. I think Lemke's kind of going through a very similar thing in Charlotte. Is a lot of these guys race junior, and especially I don't want to kind of toot our own horn here, but like the Trackhouse Club Series, right? If you look at the main offenders of
I was
the
going to
white
mention
lining,
that. I was going
it
to
was
mention that.
all guys that race at track house, because those club races kind of devolve into a white lining fest. And my dad hates it. My dad despises the white lining. I'm indifferent on it. I think if you're given a chessboard and you're given different house rules, yes, it's not pure. Yes, it's not the game of chess, but you still got to win the game, you know? But I definitely think that the pushback system is kind of the main thing that enables that to happen, because if not, it's kind of universal. Like, okay, if you're blocking with 17 laps to go in a KA race, you should get moved. I think that's something for
I think
another. What's up?
that it's an interesting point you mentioned, like the analogy of the chessboard. I think kind of the issue, because like you said, you're indifferent on it. I'm with you on that, because to me the biggest problem occurs with, I'm all for, if you want to, for 25 laps white line the racetrack, by all means go ahead and do it. We saw Harley Keeble pull it off at MCC for the entirety of that race. The issue was there's really no counter to it a lot of the times, and so I'm all for doing it, but there should be a way to kind of get around it. I mean, obviously the switchback is the easiest way to do it, but at some tracks, the switchback isn't available, or if a driver is just good enough at defending, white lining, park it on the corner, that's where the counter is basically giving them a little nudge to the corner and moving them up the racetrack. But a lot of the times that's not in the cards.
Yeah, and if you can't get it to work out in moving, then I think that says a lot more about you as a driver. So I think regardless, there's more discussion to be had for a different day on white lining, but I definitely think that what we saw this weekend was kind of a step forward in terms of overall, like, the amount that it happened. Like you mentioned, probably because of the lack of switchbacks played a lot. But the other side of the pushback bumper system is the incident that we saw in the OKN category. And this was something that I think was really kind of something that we've seen debated online recently. It was something that you might have caught over the course of the last few laps of our stream. And it was a battle between Nick Terlecki and Pauly Massimino. And to this point in the race, there had been really no contact between the two of them. Pauly drove Terlecki down for, I think, about a second and a half back after the first few laps to catch him with about 6 laps to go. They exchanged spots, and then it kind of devolved a little bit over the course of the lap with, I believe, 3 laps to go. So I'm going to play a video on board from Nick Terlecki, who had this video from, I believe this is starting with about 4.5 to 5 laps to go, and it goes through the incident, and we'll discuss A, the incident itself, and B, kind of the pushback side of things. But here's the video. So, apologies for the length of that. That did get a little bit long in this on the front side of it, but I think that the last lap and a half of that is important context because um, basically the two sides of this comes down to this. Paulie or Terlecki's side that has kind of been hotly debated is the Paulie coming down the straightaway, looked back again about halfway down the straight, got on the brakes, did what a lot of people would consider to be a brake check, right? And then that's in turn pushed Terlecki's bumper in the next corner. They make more contact. He goes off. He can't turn for 2 corners. That's kind of the basis of Nick's argument is that Paulie takes a look back, sees him, slams on the brakes. Nick gets into him, can't avoid him, and then they make contact and so on and so forth. Bumper gets pushed in. Paulie's side of it is from the lap before. You can see that he overdrives the corner and Nick does an over under and they battle throughout the rest of the lap. They get to the next lap and Paulie has Nick kind of in his hip pocket, so to speak. He's got him on his rear bumper. And knowing that the last lap he overshot the corner, this time he backs it up and doesn't want to overrun the corner. Nick gets into him. They make more contact in turn 1. No brake check happened. It was just a preventative measure to make sure he didn't overrun the corner. Kaleb, I'll start with you. Both seeing this live and then seeing the onboard, what was your take on the incident?
Yeah, I mean, I think both times that I saw it, when I saw it live and then when I saw it um, throughout Terlecki's onboard, I mean, I thought the exact same thing you just said, right? You go to the lap before, Terlecki easily over-unders Paulie because Paulie just kind of breaks a little bit too late when he's trying to defend and completely overshoots the corner, and Nick Terlecki easily over-unders him. And I think the next time when you come around, right, I think the look back by Paulie makes it look more like a brake check, but I don't necessarily think it really was, a deliberate brake check, like slamming on the brakes to have Terlecki to push his bumper in behind you. I really just think Paulie was really just trying to park it on the corner from what I saw. That's really what I thought about it when I saw it live, and then when I saw Terlecki's onboard earlier today, and then when we just rewatched it, and Terlecki pushed that bumper in, and I I think you could probably protest that towards the end, not getting that rear bumper, that front bumper penalty being slightly pushed in, but Terlecki kind of just makes contact on the exit of turn number 1 that ultimately puts him out of that race win fight with Paulie. So I mean, you can argue it could have possibly been the brake check with the pushback or whatever it may have been, but I think the real chaos kind of unfolded whenever Terlecki pushed that bumper into his wheel on the exit of turn number 1.
To me, the clip was long, but I think it actually gave us a really good idea of how great the racing was in OKN to start with. I mean, that was awesome to watch. I mean, it was 4 straight laps of over/under crossover moves. I know a few times the clip was paused a little bit to showcase kind of Paulie parking it on the corner. That's textbook, right? Paulie was doing textbook defending that entire video. And really the summary of it all is the lap prior, he blew turn 1, doing a non-brake check. And so the next lap, Paulie looks over his shoulder and he sees 2 go-karts, not 1, because Terlecki was on his bumper and on his outside was Ramos. And so now Paulie has to take into account there's a second driver in the mix that if he blows his corner, he's going to end up 3rd. And so maybe Paulie breaks a little bit soon. Yes. But I think the idea that he brake checked it's a little bit of a stretch to me. He might have tapped it early, but this is no different than what you see in cars a lot of the time. I mean, it happens, right? Like somebody in front of you, you're on the dirty side of the racetrack. You're going to tap the brakes. You'll see the brake lights go on really early, and it happens. And so for Nick, I mean, part of the issue was when Paulie braked early, Nick didn't really accommodate for that. And again, I'm putting blame on nobody for this. I think this is a racing incident. This happens. This should actually happen more often than it does. Paulie brakes early, kind of holds the brake long because he notices that Ramos is trying to rip the top which we saw kind of coming into play, right? That outside line was kind of coming into its own a little bit throughout that day. The rubber was getting pushed off, and so you're seeing too wide go through there. So Paulie was taking into account Ramos might try to go around the outside, and he has Trelecky trying to push him through the corner to get through him. And so enough bumps through the corner, and all of a sudden you get the bumpers hooked and the bumpers pushed in. And so it's super unlucky for Trelecky to happen because it should happen more than it does, because that sort of incident happens every single race. It's just Trelecky hit the bumper at the exact wrong position to knock it in and connect with his own tire. But in terms of calling it a brake check, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. Did he tap the brakes early? 100%. Right? We watched the video where he was braking the 3 laps prior is different than what he did in that lap. The difference is he's offline, and the lap prior he blew the corner, and so being a pro, being a driver that understands, okay, short-term memory, let's fix this. Brakes early, and it was a little too early, and it caught Nick off guard. But I think the rest of that video was textbook driving from both of them. The crossover moves were awesome. Paulie did a great job in terms of defending, letting Nick go around his outside, holding the brake, and then getting on the throttle, holding Nick on the outside there, knowing the difficulty of passing around Charlotte at times. So it was textbook driving from both those guys. So to me, I mean, I think that incident is completely a racing incident. It's zero blame for either of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've gone back and forth on it, right? Do I think it's a brake test in the traditional sense of the law? Not really. Like, I think that implied that there was malicious intent on Paulie's side, and I'm not ready to go that far and judge intent. I will say, if he was compensating for the previous lap, which is a valid reason because he completely blew the corner on the previous lap and overdrove it, I definitely think that you would see, like, he broke on the second time through, he broke before he got to the start finish line, which in Charlotte is pretty ridiculously early on the brakes. Now, granted, you do have the dirty track. I think that plays a lot. We've seen all weekend long, you had the offline dirt really kind of messed with sort of how everything played or how the racecraft played about. It meant that people couldn't really afford to send it in deep into turn one. Probably learned that from the previous lap. So I can understand why he would back it up that far. It's at least somewhat plausible to me. Look, at the end of the day, the only people that will know, or the only person that would really know if that was truly a brake test or not is Paulie. I think that's a pretty big accusation to go out there and make, not knowing what the data shows, not knowing what you see. And I think that the plausible deniability of having the previous lap there and kind of overrunning the corner, to me at least, is a valid enough reason to where I could buy that. I can see where Nick is frustrated too, though, because I think if you're braking before you get to the start finish line, that looks to be just eyeballing in at least 30 to 40 feet before where he broke the previous lap. And if you use F1 as an example, when Fernando Alonso broke significantly earlier into the corner against George Russell in Australia, even when Russell was half a second back, that was enough to completely throw Russell off. When you're braking 40 feet back in a go-kart, it's roughly equivalent to braking about 100 feet back in F1 car, adjusting for the speeds and whatnot. So it's a similar sort of effect where there's drastic consequences for that. And I get why Nick was thrown off. But I think the bigger thing is this doesn't happen. This conversation is not happening if there's no pushback penalty. And I think this is one slight consequence, I would say, of the pro show format, where I think that we need to have a little bit of a discussion when it comes to overturning penalties. And I'm not exactly sure what the procedural process call was when it came to the pushbacks and the OKN side of things. That's something that I need to do more paddock discussions on to get a good idea of. But regardless, that's not a penalty that should be acquired to a pushback because it had no impact on Paulie's cornering. You could tell that it clearly was not malicious in intent. And again, having to react to a cart braking 40 feet before the accepted braking zone when you're going 70 miles an hour and you're one cart length behind is a lot harder than it seems. So I can see Nick's frustration. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a brake check. I think the ideal outcome would have been no further action on either end. No penalty for the bumper, no penalty for Pauly's action or lack thereof. But yeah, it's a kind of awkward situation to look at, and I can get why Nick's upset. I can certainly understand Pauly's defense on that as well. I think it's mainly just the pushback, but ultimately hard racing. We saw a lot of good battling in OKN, and those two put on a show. For Nick, it was unfortunate the way it ended. It was a chance to get his first Pro Series win. It was a chance for Host Driver Development's first pro win. Neither of those came to fruition, and for Pauly, came out on top. But ultimately, good racing in OKN. But when we come back, we're going to show our move of the weekend, wrap things up with a really good highlight from Shifter.
So you finally want to get behind the wheel, huh?
Yeah, I've been shooting for 3 years and I've never got to drive.
Well, you're going to need some more gear than just your helmet. Why don't you go to shopakr.com. They got their inventory online, and they'll ship it the same day if you order before 5:30 p.m. Eastern.
They got shoes,
Yep.
gloves,
Yep.
rib protectors.
Got those too.
Can they make me go fast?
No.
Here at Acceleration Kart Racing, we've got everything you need to get on track. What happens next? Well, that's on you. Check us out online at shopakr.com.
Well, welcome back as we get set for our final segment of the show, where Emory himself said it. We have our move of the weekend presented by our merchandise sponsor and partner, Pride. Alex, stand up real quick, and I'll stand up as well. Some of the new shirts that came out this week, Kart Chaser, some of the new merchandise that came out. Emory, you stand up too. One of the new jackets that came out last year or 2 years ago. Those actually... I think we don't have any more. Lost headset there, but
Wait, hold on.
just released.
Before we get into it, Emory, where's your KC UNC shirt at?
Dude, seriously,
doesn't have one.
You see, I was dedicated to the craft this weekend. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into the Kart Chaser trailer, into the production team, and at no point did I ever make the connection to go walk over to Pride and buy myself the UNC shirt. So
unreal,
man. I gotta say, I hate that. You know, I have UNC swag underneath me. As soon as this podcast goes, I will be wearing it. But hey, respect to Alex. He respects the brand more than I do, and that takes a lot. So
yes, sir. All right. So with our move of the weekend, I'm gonna roll the clip here, and you'll see our move of the weekend winner.
Gotten a much better launch, and in the bus stop in clear. He clipped the bumper though, and Kevin Bailiff gets around them both. Bailiff into third. Irwin under fire for...
So Gavin Bailiff, a 2-for-1 move into the bus stop chicane while Billy Musgrave and Jay Irwin were fighting, earns him the first move of the weekend of the season. So round of applause, Gavin Bailiff, move of the weekend, with this return of the move of the weekend segment here into the podcast by Get Pride. Lastly, to wrap up the show, we had a couple of questions in our Instagram I guess poll you can call it, that we had this past weekend, and we had a couple of questions. Somebody asked OKN Junior, good package, ?
Great package. I think the fact that drivers were getting better every single session on the track was a really good thing. We saw them get into the mid 41s. I think the reliability is something that kind of confuses me. But in talking to a couple of the mechanics, I think the biggest issue there is you've got drivers that haven't really been asked to modulate the throttle that much in their karting careers, that are getting thrown into a package that the all throttle deceleration and quick acceleration is notorious for chewing up reed cages. I think that's where a majority of the mechanical failures came through. So I think that's just maybe some driver inexperience and a little bit of package on reliability as well. But the driving side of it, I think maybe led to that. But as a whole, the racing was good. We saw Michael McGoy have really good showings out there. We saw Isaac Malkuit contend for a win. There was a lot of good racing in OKN or OKNJ, and it's good to see it on the schedule. We also got a good amount of entries. We got 13, I believe, for the weekend, which for a new class, for the first time running it with no real like prior club experience either, other than you could say the Challenge of Americas, that's on a club series, but that's about the only other series that we've seen run OKMJ. So for them to have that strong of a pool in the first weekend, I would say is very encouraging, and I'm excited to see what it morphs into over the course of the rest of the year.
I agree with you, Emory. I think this is one of the futures of junior racing. I think it's growing pains is what we saw this weekend, right? And like you mentioned, the mechanicals really weren't um, unbeknownst to us. Like, were there a lot? Yes, but after talking with a lot of the guys who run OKN, and coach the OKNJ guys like Paulie, a lot of the issues were the on-off throttles. That's just comes down to that. That's why a lot of the drivers, a lot of mechanicals, there are some spark plug issues, but majority are reed cages, especially in the junior class, and that's just because through the middle of the corner they're stabbing the gas trying to get back to it, flooding the motor, and it's just not what you could do with the direct drive package like you can do with an X30 or a KA. You can't do that in the OKN package or the OKNJ package, and that's just going to happen naturally on the first weekend on the motor. A lot of these junior kids didn't even drive it before this weekend, so they had 4 practices to get used to it before qualifying, and really never got used to it. Especially if you've been driving for a long time through the micro mini junior KA X30, of your career, it's a habit that you build, and you don't get punished for it on the clutch driven, motors like you do maybe with the direct drive motor. So for sure, I think as the season goes on, less and less mechanicals as the drivers get used to it, and as the motor progresses as a whole. Like you mentioned, we've only seen this package rarely. I mean, in the Challenge of Americas when it was in that. So for it to actually make its return now with the Stars guys, it'll continue to grow, just like what we see with the OKN package in its second year. So I'm excited for it, and I think for 13 entries and its first run on the national scene, I think it'll grow as the year goes on, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and a lot of growing pains for the OKNJ class. But that wraps up our 9th episode of KC Grid Talk every single Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're from Texas, it's on at 7. Coming up this weekend, we have KC Grassroots coming back for the 3rd round of the Texas Sprint Racing Series, the Summer Shootout, and the AMP AMP round number 4 of their club series. And then we'll be back next week with more action. This has been KC Grid Talk. Myself, Kaleb Vieska, the one and only, everybody's favorite Ginger, Emory Lida, and everybody's favorite guy who's 5'6", Alexander Searle. This has been episode number 9 of KC Grid Talk every single Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you guys very much for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.